Welcome everybody to an episode of Gambe. My name is Art Dicker. I'm the host of the show, and I'm joined here today by Paul Lin. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
Paul is previously Chief Strategy Officer at OMD China. He's also currently the chair of the marketing committee at the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. And Paul, so you grew up in California and Canada.
Correct.
And you moved here 8 years ago?
Yes.
What brought you here?
I think a number of reasons, right? One was it was a life choice for me, right? I was mobile. I had the ability to go. I think the second thing was obviously career. So there was an element of, with my life choice of discovery and going on a venture, what can I do in terms of building out my career, doing something fulfilling? China was still relatively not as big in the news as it was today, right? Everything that you're reading now in either the New York Times or the Guardian is all about China. But I think back then it was still a little bit rough around the edges, right? So I think that ability to be in a market that was still growing, a market that still had a huge amount of opportunity, and to kind of go back to my roots, I think was a big part of me wanting to come out here.
Okay, so Paul, a lot of big box retailers like Suning and Walmart in China, they've been struggling a lot lately. But here comes Costco out of nowhere, and they decided to come into China. So what's up with that?
It's a very good question. I think what I read was that they did some market intelligence, right? They did the research on the ground. They've been all around Asia, but China was obviously an entity that they felt like they wanted to be cautious, but at the same time do it properly. Right, so they came in and they opened up a store, and all the fanfare was around this opening day. You know, queues and all these video clips coming out of old, grandmas like fighting for meat, and lineups, for the cash register. And the discussion was all around, my peers was all around, is this actually real? Right, or is it staged? As a way to get a nice little clip
Or
that
induced, right? Like, yeah.
Exactly. And I think, to be honest, probably Costco didn't. They're probably coming in understanding all the risks, and they did that assessment. But the audience, the people know, right? I think Chinese consumers are smart. They do the research. They travel abroad. They know about the Costco name. So they were excited that they were coming, right? The format of having a membership and getting deep discounts on goods and supplies that they need for their house. So I think all of those things, I think it was just the brand recognition outside of the country, knowing it was coming, and I think the hype around the day that it was going to open, I think all those things set itself up really nicely to be this sort of nice chaotic mess.
Now, how does this all translate for foreign brands? Because historically, at least the perception's been that foreign brands have had a little bit of an advantage, let's say,
Correct.
On trust, and that different categories, it comes out differently.
Yeah.
Like nutrition products and things like that, there's always been a trust advantage for foreign brands.
Yeah.
But across the board generally, are you still seeing that foreign brands have an advantage at all as far as reputation and trust compared to local brands?
No, not at all, right? I think that's starting to change probably within the last few years, right? And it's not there are a lot of reasons that this is happening, right? What sometimes in the press, they'll write the fact that it is because Chinese are becoming a lot more nationalistic, right? They're supporting their country. I think if anything, Chinese brands are just out delivering on capability, out delivering on function, out delivering on value. Right, and that's really the crux of it if you get down to it, right? This whole, Huawei's in the news. It is the only Chinese brand within the smartphone category that's been growing, right? Vivo, Oppo, Xiaomi have not been growing. And again, they're all Chinese brands as well, right? But Huawei, if you just look at the individual product, you look at their product line, you look at what they're making in a phone or what they're putting in a phone that's catered to the local audience, catered to the middle class, catered to, all spectrums, you're seeing that they're just out delivering in terms of just the wow factor within each phone. And I think if anything, foreign brands have a lot of times relied on the fact that they were foreign, right? As an entryway.
Comfortable, maybe.
Exactly, right? As a gateway in, as a way to build that level of trust that they didn't have to work so hard. right? And that has started to pivot and change in this market. And Chinese consumers, if anything, are the most, knowledgeable. They do their research. They do their research here in China. They do their research. They look at external sort of forums and blogs and celebrities as well, right? And they recognize that Chinese brands are, they're out delivering on all the sort of benefits depending on the category that you're in. And they're super competitive on price, right? And I think those two factors, if anything else, are leading to Chinese brands, depending on the category, outperforming Western brands.
And Chinese consumers are also doing their own market research outside of China.
Yes.
With the rapid, massive expansion of Chinese outbound tourism, right?
Yes.
So they can actually go, to the U.S. or Europe and see themselves whether these are legit brands, are they good brands in their home countries.
Correct.
And that was not something maybe that was happening as much before. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right? I think, again, the proliferation of social media has helped, right? So a media channel that is, if anything, brands and consumption and it's not political, right? So it's open. You have outbound tourism that you see, and it's showing in the data around people traveling around the world, right? So, and they're shopping in those, instances, right? They're the highest sort of spenders out of any other segment of the tourist group out there, right? And when they do that, they'll write about their experiences, they'll share it, they'll come home, they'll buy things for their family and friends, right? A lot of people send their, if they know someone's going to North America or to Europe, they'll tell them to buy something for them, right? Part of that is the pre-research or, all the work that they do before they get there. But at the same time, all these consumers are getting smarter, right? And they're going abroad. And if anything, you look at a platform like Dianping, which is very much, it's the Yelp version of China. And you go abroad and you look at restaurant reviews, you look at, shopping malls, you look at even outlets. They have a huge number of people talking about it. And it's a way, again, it's a way for them to inform themselves of where to buy, what's good or not on a Chinese platform, but in a Western context.
And well, and you look at particularly the people that are doing so much of the outbound traveling. It's also the younger generation,
Correct.
Too.
Correct.
Maybe even studying abroad. That's
Correct.
Obviously been increasing a lot too. These kind of, we call them post-90s consumers, people born after 1990, roughly equivalent to the millennials, maybe in the U.S. Are these folks' buying habits different? Are they maybe, as far as loyalty to brands or what they're expecting out of brands, are they different in their habits from the older generation?
Yeah, I think so. But I think if anything, the older generation is probably acclimatizing themselves to the younger generation. Okay. And again, some of the data showing that, but some of the anecdotal research in terms of just talking to consumers, understanding how they're buying, even a lot of the marketing campaigns that we do, if it's to an older segment, a lot of the influence, a lot of the celebrities, a lot of the partnerships that we do are still catered to a younger set, right? Because it's always the halo effect of it's aspirational. I want to feel like I'm young. I want to buy something that makes me feel youthful. Okay. I think if you look at the post-90s, you look at even the post-00s, right, which would be roughly 18, 19 years old as of today. They are, again, they're less brand loyal. That's correct. But I think what's happening now is the competitive landscape is just getting better in terms of the product quality that's coming to market. All right. The size of China with, the middle class, if you want to call it that, it's a huge pool. It's singularly focused in one market. And so all these brands are trying to cater to them depending on if they're on the high end or if they're on the low end, right? And I think with a lot of these younger consumers, yes, they're smarter, right? Their availability to recommendations, their access to information, they're digitally savvy, right? They understand what's going on. And I think that behavior has lent itself to either the latest trend, right? Or the latest influencer that they like that's talking about or partnering with brands. And I think, it goes back to what I said earlier around the propositions around the product benefits, the function. They're becoming equally superior, if not more superior than Western brands, right? So the legacy of P&G and Unilever, and this is the detergent, or this is the product that my parents use. Again, it has that historical context. Here they don't have that, right? So the ability for change, to happen, or to try new things, is just it's part of the behavior. And so I think with the advent of technology, with the advent of short attention spans, the proliferation of media and all these different things has just changed the habit to something that trends will last very short periods of time, right? And I think for that reason, the brand loyalty aspect is less of an issue, and it's more about what value, what experience, what personalization can I give to you, right? And I think the younger group have done that, have requested that, and brands have catered to that.
Do you think that that's especially true for China? Because some of what you said is probably also applicable to the younger generation and their expectations for products in the U.S. and
Correct.
of their brands. But do you think China is moving at an extra fast pace as far as consumers' expectations on, value for price,
Yep.
variety of product, individualization of customization of product? Do you think that foreign brands are facing a challenge in China because things maybe even are moving faster in China than they are in other parts of the world?
So yes, right. So I think that element of agility is probably more prevalent here. Okay, and part of that is the ability. Again, it's a whole infrastructure or supply chain attached to that. All right. So I could request a certain type of flavor, or a certain type of taste profile in food, which then you see a lot of the fast food chains, the fast casual chains adopting that. All right. You see it in the fashion category where there are certain type of trends, patterns, material that's being made and going to market a lot quicker here in China. I think that the ability to scale, the ability to create large volumes of a product in a country as big, a market size as big as this, has made that back end thing work probably better for companies and organizations. And because of that, the ability to put new things out in the market and test them and see whether or not people are picking up probably happens here more than if you're a market, or if you're a country of 20, 30 million people, where the ability to, again, have your warehouse, your manufacturing, your R&D, and your customers all in the same market is not necessarily going to happen, right? We live in a very globalized society, right? So, there's a lot of trade that happens between countries. But I think the beauty of China and this thing around agility is the fact that all of those vertical units of R&D, testing, production, shipment, all happen in China, right? And your ability to then innovate or test things out is much quicker because the go-to-market has been compressed. All right. And because of that, companies have been able to cater products, and then Chinese consumers see it. And once they see it in one category, they'll expect it from the competitive set. Once they expect that from the category, then they move on to other categories, right? So, which is why I gave I gave the example around food, and then there's fashion, and then there's phones, and then all these other things, right? So that their expectation has then been level set to this speed, that, again, Westerners could say I want something, but the ability to bring it to market from an R&D all the way to production in store is a longer life cycle, because a lot of the stuff is made here in China or made in Asia, right? So, but in China it's all compressed here. So again, that ability to meet that demand is much faster, and it's actually more real.
So that's a very good point, because I don't think a lot of people sometimes still think of China as just this manufacturing powerhouse. And that's an advantage for rapidly producing new kinds of products and iterating. But it's such a big consumer market here too, and the feedback is almost instantaneous now, with everybody having mobile phones and evaluating products and getting that instant feedback. The offline kind of online offline integration is big here, and you were kind of alluding to that as well. We've seen firms competing really fiercely online to grab people's attention. And it's actually gotten quite expensive to promote products online. Are you seeing more and more brands roll out kind of working backwards now and rolling out an offline presence to go with their online presence? Something like Xiaomi, for example.
Yeah. It's a good point, right? It depends a lot on your size. how much money you have and your appetite for risk. All right. I think even now we'll get, I'll see briefs, I'll see clients, potential clients, and I think back to even 3 or 4 years ago where they're big players in their market, but their home country is probably 30, 40 million people, right? They probably hold dominant share. And they come here thinking that, we have that level of trust, we have that reputation, gold standard, and this attitude, if I build it, they will come, all right? And some of them would open up online, right? They read something in the paper, they see all these consumers using their phones to shop, and the thought that they would open up a Tmall store, for them, they thought that was enough, all right? And what's happened now is that if you just do a simple search on any of these platforms, no matter what category you're in, probably 30, 40, 50, 200 different competitive sets, right? And in that, there's a specific algorithm that's based on all these variables, how popular you are, your sales, your returns, your comments, so on and so forth, that then place you at that that page 1 or page 2 of the search result, all right? So the second thing is obviously cost, right? Setting up that is probably relatively less expensive than leasing a physical brick and mortar, but then your ability to drive that traffic, that CPM cost from a paid media perspective has just increased because that demand is there and they could get away with it, okay? Xiaomi is a very good example. It's an established brand. It's got a lot of money with it, and they have a portfolio and that name recognition. And it's interesting because even if you see a brand like Alibaba and Tmall, for Singles Day, they're doing a lot of offline advertising as a way to build that awareness to get people to come on that day for shopping, all right? And you even see it in the West where Amazon and a lot of the e-commerce players are doing traditional television and print. And it makes you wonder, especially in our industry where everything is digital and data can capture everything, that these institutionalized digital players are now moving offline to get their traffic, right? So it's starting to happen. And I think part of it is a combination of just competitiveness, of costs. There's probably just a fatigue factor where, there's just so much online and people are so exposed to digital and their phones that sometimes, doing out of home and TV is actually making a bigger impact.
Yeah, they're digitally overwhelmed.
Exactly.
So it's actually a novel approach to be offline now.
Exactly.
Full circle.
And even if you ask anyone, and I sit in a lot of qualitative research, right? You ask people, name an ad that you remember. The format that they always give you is usually traditional format. Out of home, I was at the airport, I saw this. I saw a TV spot that did this, right? It's less around digital, right? So that memorability, all those factors that you try to measure within research, a lot of the times comes back to offline. And I think that's the impact that a lot of the times these bricks and mortars has the ability to harness, the ability to touch something, to pick it up, to use it, to be able to do a comparison shop, to talk to a customer service person, right? And I think we sometimes negate that. We negate that sort of that human element that's important. And again, Xiaomi probably took a very long time to get to a point where they say we're going to invest in offline retail, but they continue to grow. They continue to develop more stores, and they're not losing money, right? So, and you're starting to see, Tmall sort of again advertising and marketing initiatives that are happening offline. You're starting to see a lot of brands doing event activations or experiential events. Again, those things have shown to make a deeper level of impact. Again, your reach is not going to be there, right? If you do an activation only in a certain part of Shanghai on a weekend, you're only going to reach, 50,000, 100,000. If you're lucky, maybe 500,000 people, all right? Whereas you could scale that within digital. But again, the favorability, what people remember, is becoming less. It's deeper. It's the quality is better offline. Which is why you're seeing a lot more of this happening. And you're seeing even brands that you've never heard of as a market entry play, as part of a way to launch something. They'll do some sort of fashion show. They'll do some sort of art exhibit. They'll do some sort of collaboration as a way to build that, right? And if you plan this out from a marketing perspective, you do that right, then you could take a lot of that content or shoot that content and then distribute it online, right? And again, that's usually a nice little plan or approach, especially here in China, that could work quite well. Or is focused on, self-serving things, right? So I think there's a move now to, they said before that China was, Chinese people were all about labels, right? I'm going to buy something based on the label, and not necessarily all the other attributes that you would look at from a functional perspective, right? That has obviously switched itself to a point now where, those functional attributes along with this value equation, right? What I'm paying, what I get versus what I'm paying for is, if anything, becoming a lot more, Chinese consumers getting a lot smarter on that, right? So try to figure out what it is within your value equation that you're offering to Chinese customers, right? And be very, very specific and very truthful to yourself about that, right? So if you could sort of align all those different attributes, it's doing good for the country, it's serving the needs of Chinese consumers and what they're looking for, right? Whether you're a millennial brand, whether you're a family brand, whether you're geared towards senior citizens, whether you're a B2B type of player, right? Identify what that is, and be really good at it. Because again, it goes back to what we said earlier, Chinese are not necessarily brand loyal, right? So if you could offer something that's unique, that's new, that's one of a kind, you see it in beauty, where a lot of these beauty brands are doing personalized subscription models where you get products sent to you, right? Or the ability to create a customized face mask, right? So J&J has created this membership program called Mask ID, where you could, the whole concept of these beauty masks are very prevalent here, but you could get one customized specific to your skin type, to the shape of your face, to whether you're, it's dry skin or oily skin or acne skin, and you could get that delivered, and they know all that behavior, you've inputted it in, and they'll ship it to you, right? So that level of service, that level of care comes in a nice, again, it's very similar to Birchbox, but I think all those other technology elements, which are Chinese, are very fickle, and it works for them. I think if you add them all up, they create something that's unique and something that would be compelling. See that here, okay? You kind of do, but it isn't. Again, it's a one-time event that they're doing it. It's not necessarily a way of life. All right, so I think self-expression, breaking out, being different, it's episodic, I think, with Chinese, okay? And a lot of that is they'll probably do it, but then in the back of their mind, there's still this element from, Confucian values around the older generation, around their parents, that is still there within them, okay? I think self-expression in a North American context is, I'm going to rebel against anything my parents, said to me or taught me, right? And that is the way, and that's a way of life for them, right? And it's still self-expression, but again, the context of it, the nuances are different.
It's almost celebrated in the West. Right?
Exactly. It's celebrated, right? And even if you, this whole expression around "okay, boomers," right? And it's used, it's a mindset, and it's funny because even if the boomer is right, it's the fact that it came from that individual. I have to say no to it. I have to discount whatever it is that they're saying. All right. And again, it's like you said, it's celebrated.
It's like
right?
a rite of passage. Yeah.
It's a rite of passage. If I go against everything my parents said, then it's an honorable thing to do. All right. And then the media writes about it, and it's a beautiful story, and it's a beautiful narrative, and people gleam onto that. Right.
Thanks, Paul, for joining. This was awesome. I really think the audience is going to get a lot out of the entire discussion, and a lot of good takeaways for them, especially if they're trying to start a business or launch their product in China. So thank you so much for joining.
No, thank you for having me. Again, there's a lot of opportunity, right? It's a very big market. I think the one piece of advice I tell a lot of my clients and a lot of people coming here is just do your due diligence, okay? The mantra, build it and they will come, is not necessarily true. It's absolutely not true here. And your market research, and you partner with someone local on the ground here.
So speaking of partnering and working with folks on the ground here, there's a tradition of what we call cheers, or ganbei, if you've closed a deal on a new partnership, for example. So our name of our show is ganbei. Nice. So we have a tradition here of doing a toast at the end. So thank you again, Paul, for joining, and ganbei.
Ganbei.
Ganbei. Well, welcome back, Paul. It's great to have you here. We're recording this time on Zoom because, well, things have changed since we last talked. And uh, last time we talked was back in November, actually. And
Wow.
yeah, we there's a bit of delay with the holidays, and then this COVID-19 virus situation just blew up, and so that really affects a bit of what we talked about before. So first, welcome back, Paul, and how are you doing these days?
Thank you, thank you. I'm safe, right? I'm healthy, and I think that's the most important thing during this period of time. Uh, there's a lot that's been happening around the world, in Asia and China. So I'm just fortunate that I'm healthy, and the rest of my wife is healthy, and the rest of our family is healthy. And there isn't,
Yeah.
someone asked me the other day, he's like, do you know anyone with COVID? And I said, no, I don't. And so I could be thankful for that. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I likewise. It's really a time to be grateful for the things that we have in life, and not take things for granted.
Absolutely.
Well, but we do, the world, the business and the economy still press on, even in these crazy times. And one of the things we talked about last time was brands and consumers in China, and I wanted to tie it back together and see what's changed. And one of the things we talked about before was consumers in China tended to have very high expectations of brands on value, on things like customization of product for users and that whole user experience. So what do you think, if anything, how are brands going to be, how are consumers' expectations of brands changed in a post-virus world?
It's a good question. I think so. I think those level of personalization, customization, speed is ubiquitous. It's going to still be around, right? I think the values have definitely been altered, right? So there was a McKinsey report that came out recently, around, what is important to you now, or what are some of the expectations that you have, or, what outcomes are you looking at? And, a lot of it's centered around personal health, right? Health of yourself, health of your immediate family, the health and safety of the people around you, right? So your parents, your grandparents, understanding that this hits, people that are a lot more vulnerable. And there's this level of uncertainty in terms of when it's going to end, when it's going to stop. And China is starting to open up now, right? At this point, a lot of it is all psychological, right? So, but then you're watching the news and you're seeing it migrate to Europe, which is currently on fire, and then the U.S., which is it's just at the peak of it, just hitting the apex, depending on what part of the world you're in, what region you're in. So it's this level of uncertainty in terms of when, and we live in a globalized society, and China is if anything, is spearheading globalization now, versus some of the other countries that used to own it before, right? So I think that level, so the values have changed, right? I think those things around those hygiene factors around speed, around personalization, now it will be a lot more around health and safety, right? So if you are food service, a lot of delivery companies now are putting the name of the person that made the food, the person that packed your food, the person that delivered your food. They're putting temperature readings on it, right? And it doesn't mean that it's 100% true, but it's the fact that they're going through that process, which is, as a brand, you're trying to showcase, you're trying to, convey public trust, right? You're trying to add into that layer, right? Everywhere you go now, there's temperature readings, there's mass, especially in China, everywhere you go, it's pretty much at 99% adoption. So all those different things, are happening at a public health level, at a societal level. So I think as brand and as marketers, you have to understand that that is top of mind right now. And anything you do, either if you're a service-based sort of company that's making products, if you're an online company, if you're an offline company, things around, walking into a store and checking, all the different checks that you have in terms of your QR code, in terms of sanitization, in terms of mask wearing. Those are all lined to just, again, they're hygiene now, right? And it's something that where the values, what is important to you, is something that brands need to align to just be accepted.
Now, how about consumer behavior? So obviously, folks have gotten accustomed to living inside and working remotely, and some of these changes in behaviors will be universal, and the same changes will take place in the U.S. and Europe. Anyone that will have gone through an extended lockdown and so forth.
Yeah.
How about stuff that might be unique to China and some of the, China, of course, was already in a lot of ways very capable of handling a situation like this with delivery everywhere and people, smartphone penetration and people. Now, what things do you think will have changed and will stick after this?
Yeah, it's interesting, right there. Yeah, you read a lot of reports. You hear people saying like there's going to be more digitization, and the thing is, it was kind of already at a ceiling, right? I don't think you could probably squeeze out anymore, right? So I think the layer that's probably going to be added on top is if you're a product-based sort of, if your business model is based on a specific product, there's going to be a service layer now you're probably going to have to add on as an organization, right? There are, again, a lot of it's psychological now, right? So people are willing to go out, people are going out. I think there's a lot of pent-up anxiety where people want to go out and going to shops and malls and retail is, a lot of they're busy, right? But I think part of it is at nighttime, people are coming home, right? So I think it's a mix of, there's a new normal. There is no normal anymore, right? The normal has been readjusted. And I think that, are people going to work from home more? I think it's a balance. I think they'll probably work from home like 30-40% of the time. And then the other part of it, they'll still go into the office, right? And so it's not gonna be an extreme of people working 100% from home. Whereas the other part is there aren't going to be extreme of, again, after a while, and when I say a while, we're probably looking at 12, 18 months, right? In terms of a timeline of, again, the safety issue, public health issue is going to be probably a lot more stable, but it'll be slowly gradual. And again, if you look at adoption of media and behavior of e-commerce, it was already very high already, right? So the layer is around just, the type of person that handled your package, the safety issues in terms of the type of, how it was put together, making sure that you're instilling that trust. So when they receive it, no matter if it went through the whole supply chain, the logistics chain, multiple people touching it, that it's somehow, when I get it, I feel it's safe. I don't need to wear gloves. I don't need to wear protective gear to open up a package. Right, so that is where I think if you're a product, if you're somehow, if you're standalone product object that you're selling, there's going to be a service layer, that includes all of the facilities. If you're a very highly matrix organization, all those departments coming together to make sure that the end customer is confident, not just in the usage of the product, right? And it works, again, that's standard, and it's always been the case, but how it got from the beginning, how it's put together, how it's packaged, and then how it's delivered. That part will be, again, some of it's psychological in terms of making sure that, customers feel comfortable. But I think that in terms of behavioral mindset will definitely be affected.
It makes sense. Yeah. I mean, a lot of ways, perhaps the rest of the world will not catch up, but see the things that China had as far as the integration of, e-commerce and O2O and business models and how things so much was able to keep functioning here when everyone was under lockdown, and other people might be demanding that more from companies in their countries. And that actually goes to my third and kind of final question to get our audience caught up on things now. We talked last time a lot about the speed of China and the way products could iterate so fast here because you had the whole vertical supply chain, the whole from R&D to manufacturing was all here. and that sped up product development and iterations, like I said. How did that speed showcase itself during these the lockdown times, during these times when companies had to adapt very fast to a changing situation?
Yeah, I think a lot of, the beauty is that, in the first part when we met was around the infrastructure, and that part of it, it's not it's not the sexy part, it's not the part you see, but it's what makes sexy happen, right? So that underlying infrastructure, that foundational element was, again, already there, right? I think if you think about it, again, the values of what I find important to me, the values that I'm embracing in terms of just health and safety, the safety of the people around me. People, I think brands and companies then need to just look at their entire portfolio mix, right? Part of it is, how do I take existing things that I'm making and layer on that, rather than just talking about it, take action in terms of satisfying the needs and the mindset of customers now, right? The second part is, if you do not have a product that sort of satisfies that, then you need to then build in that product to be able to do that, okay? You hear, very simple example is all around, again, everything is all around public health. So being able to re-engineer your factories to then start making masks, to make gowns, to make anything that, frontline workers and hospital and all those people need to wear. And then, now they're exporting all of that stuff, right? So, but I think if we focus on the domestic market and what brands need to do, again, they need to align to a lot of those values that people have. If you're an online business, there are, before coronavirus and now afterwards, part of it is you might need to have something that is offline to showcase health and safety, right? To be able to show the technology that is catering to a lot of the needs and the things that you're worried about now versus before, because again, there's only so much interaction, being able to touch things, feel things, have someone answer questions. I think all of those, needs need to be satisfied. Some of it will be offline. Some of it could be online in terms of just, 24/7 customer service of some kind, right? Again, but all of those things were already in place in China, right? So a lot of it is just a higher number, resourcing issue in terms of people manning those, building it, having empathy, putting empathy in action rather than it just being a manifesto that you see on the walls of your corporation, but actually putting it in action. And then there's obviously going to be a CSR, a corporate social responsibility layer on top of it, right? What you're donating, the outreach you're doing in terms of, it could be as simple as Wuhan and Hubei, the people around you, your support of frontline workers and hospital and all those things. So those things are going to be a lot more prevalent. I think people, locals will definitely move towards brands that are supporting that. And at the end of the day, they'll probably know someone that was affected. Either they were someone that was treating them or someone that got the virus or someone, again, we were all in lockdown, right? And this will be universal around the world, right? Especially in Europe and in North America, they'll know someone that knows someone, right? And that will have a deep impact because there's a common denominator in terms of the suffering, the anxiety, and the experience that we all went through.
Yeah, in that way, it really brings people together, and I think people, especially in China, kind of, being the first country that went through it, it was kind of a collective bonding experience almost. People were rallying for everyone in Wuhan to, Wuhan Jiao to get through the situation, and so it's definitely a coming together, and it's interesting to see. It will be interesting to see how that keeps playing out as far as consumer behavior. I think you highlighted a lot of things that and trends and expectations of brands. It feels like a changed world. It really feels like we went through this somewhat traumatic experience for everybody, some much more so than others, and we've come out. It's starting to come out on the other side, at least in China, and it's things have changed, right? I think that's the simplest way to put it. Things have really fundamentally changed in so many ways.
Yeah, right. And again, we focus a lot on the public health layer, right? But there's the economic aspect of it, right? So at the very beginning, right, China started and people weren't working, right? So there was no economic activity internally here. And now what's happened is that now there's economic activity, but there's no demand, right? So China is very much export focused. It's not an economy that's driven by domestic consumption, right? So demand has fallen off, and demand will slowly come back. But the big question that no one can really answer right now is to what level it's gonna come back, right? And if anything, I would, I think a lot of people are saying it's not going to come back to 100%, right? So is it at 50%? Is it at 40%? So then that means that the government needs to then set policies in place to get people to consume, to buy, to have activities. Right, and a lot of those cannot just be digital and through a screen, right? It could happen, but again, it's still, there are a lot of retail stores, there's a lot of malls, there's a lot of shops, there are a lot of people. There's a service economy is massive, right? I think Morgan Stanley said, I read a piece the other day that said there's 50 or 60 million unemployed in the service sector in China, right? And then another 20 million in manufacturing. So it's not going to get better. So then again, how do we drive domestic consumption around that? And then people are going to, this anxiety around their jobs and economics and getting a raise or all these things
just like they were before. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, all of these things are they're just on the cusp now. People are starting to write about it. People are talking about it. It's not going to get better, right? And so as brands, as companies, you need to keep that in mind and use that again. Think about the values and the perception and the behaviors and the mindset that people are going to have 6 months, 8 months, literally 24 months,
right,
until even there's a vaccine. But the vaccine will not be, again, it will not hit critical mass in a year's time. So all these things you need to think about, and then how do you then cater? Show some empathy, show some action for the worries and anxieties that people will most likely have for a long time.
I can picture, let's say, we talked last time about how there's so much expensive online advertising, but things like TV commercials and traditional media still makes the biggest impression in people, what they remember. I could picture a TV commercial going something like, I could picture something flopping where it would be like, okay, we made it through, let's go celebrate, right? Kind of, let's go out to Disney World or the Disney Resort or something like that, which doesn't sound right? It neglects all the people that have been left behind, figuratively and literally, versus a message that might say, show your loved ones around you and some of the sacrifices that people have made, and nurses and the hospitals and so forth. And it's like, it's a time to be thankful, and then just maybe throw your brand very subtly in that message and kind of didiao, as you'd say in Chinese, right? It's something a little more reserved and humble.
There's an element around, permissibility, right? Giving people permission to have fun, right? And that's there are some brands that are, you're seeing growth in snacking categories in China, right? So snacks, again, it's 5-7 RMB product. It's indulgent. It gives you a short time span of fun, but it gives you permission to do that, right? Because you've been stuck inside, you've been stuck indoors, you haven't been able to have, to articulate fun in any other way. So I'm gonna eat something that's comfort food, and I'm not gonna worry about diet or anything else. But so snacking category has done that, right? But again, it's kind of low involvement and low cost. Right, you then have to scale that up into, travel is a whole different other sector that's just going to be severely affected. But the Disneyland one, so domestic travel, it could be it, right? So, and part of it is, am I allowed to have fun? There's still people suffering. Brands that could sort of do that balance very well, that allow people the permission to do that. I think is, again, it's something depending on the category and what you make and what you do, but that's an area that I think is going to be part of the strategic thinking as you in the next while.
Well, I guess we can wrap it up by saying hopefully, but we both can see a brighter day, and we can
Yep.
see a time when everyone gets through this. Not this. China's again seems to be on getting through this now, and things are getting better, and we just hope that the rest of the world will quickly as well. But it seems like we will get through this. Things will eventually get something back to normal around the world, and life will go on. Changed as we've discussed, but it will go on. And I don't know, Paul, any other closing things you want to say?
No, are just stay healthy, go have some fun, right? I think it's a balance. And I think for people watching here, again, don't, it's all psychological at this point, right? And it's, if anything, you're allowed to go and have fun and be indulgent and do those things, right? Because people that are suffering would still want you to do those things, right?
Exactly.
And that's not a way to live life. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens, and love to we could do a follow-up in a year's time, right? But those would be my last words.
Yeah. Well, let's end it on that. I really appreciate Paul coming back, and for the audience, we're releasing both the original episode and this supplement together, and you'll see that interesting juxtaposition of the two, and how you'll see how things have changed just in the discussions.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate you coming back on again.
Thank you.